I thought marrying Selene Vale meant my life had finally become untouchable. She was the kind of woman people stepped aside for without being asked. The kind of alpha who could quiet a room with one glance and make the city bend around her name. Standing beside her, wearing her ring, living behind glass and steel, high above the streets, I told myself I was lucky. Maybe I was. But luck has a strange way of changing shape when the person who loves you also decides what you're allowed to know, where you're allowed to go, and how much fear you're expected to survive, in silence. The worst part is that I didn't realize when the shift began. Not when she started keeping things from me. Not when every explanation became shorter and every rule became firmer. Not even when I began to feel more managed than loved. I only understood the truth on the night I needed her to choose me and watched her choose power instead. After that, nothing she had ever called protection sounded the same again. The first time my female alpha locked the penthouse door from the outside, she kissed my forehead and told me it was for my safety. Before we get into the story, thank you so much for being here and supporting my channel. I'd love to know where you're watching from, so please tell me in the comments, and also let me know what kind of story you want next. And if you'd like to support me, the best way is by commenting, liking this video, and subscribing to the channel. The first time my female alpha locked the penthouse door from the outside, she kissed my forehead and told me it was for my safety. The second time, she didn't kiss me at all. By the third lock, I stopped pretending I was still her wife, instead of her prisoner. I used to think the city belonged to Selene Vale. From the windows of our glass tower, the skyline bent around her family name, the way people bent around her presence at charity galas, board meetings, and pack tribunals. Selene was the kind of alpha other alphas lowered their eyes for. She was young, terrifyingly composed, rich enough to buy silence, and beautiful in the cruel, polished way that made cameras love her and enemies underestimate how cold she could become. I was the opposite. I was an Omega from the South Docks with a scholarship, a careful voice, and a habit of apologizing before anyone asked me to. When Selene first chose me, the entire city treated it like a scandal in silk. The Vale heir had made it an Omega with no pedigree, no influential pack, and no last name that opened doors. They thought I would be temporary. They thought Selene would get bored. They thought she would wake up one morning, remember she was born for dynastic mergers and board-approved contracts, and throw me away before the ink dried on the tabloids. Instead, she married me in a private ceremony with no press and a ring heavy enough to feel like a promise. For 11 months, I believed it was one. Then came the Winter Meridian Gala. That was the night I understood love could look exactly like possession, until the moment it turned the key. The gala took place in the Vale Conservatory, a greenhouse of imported ice orchids and glass arches overlooking the river. Every major alpha family in the city was there. Board members, investors, politicians, pack elders who hated me with elegant smiles. I stood beside Selene in a silver dress chosen by her assistant because Selene said she was too busy to help. Too busy had become the anthem of our marriage. Too busy to eat with me. Too busy to answer my messages. Too busy to notice that I had begun waking alone, sleeping alone, and talking to walls dressed in expensive art. Too busy, but never too busy, to tell security which elevator I was allowed to use. That night, she looked devastating in black. Her hair was pinned back from her face. Her diamond cufflinks flashed each time she lifted a champagne flute she never drank from. She was speaking with the board near the central fountain when the first cramp hit under my ribs. It wasn't dramatic. It was a tight twist of pain, followed by the cold, unmistakable flare of Omega distress. My suppressants had been changed the week before by the Vale medical team. Selene said the new brand was better.
I had trusted her. Now my pulse stumbled, and the room blurred at the edges. I touched my mate mark through the fabric at my throat and sent her a message. Selene, I don't feel right. No answer. I waited 30 seconds and tried again. Please come. The strings overhead were playing something classical and predatory. Laughter spilled around me in polished little bursts. No answer. Another cramp doubled me over beside an arrangement of white roses that smelled so sharp I nearly gagged. I called her, once, twice, 3 times. Each ring sliced deeper into my chest than the last. Across the hall, Selene pulled her phone from her pocket, glanced at the screen, and silenced it without changing her expression. My lungs forgot how to work. She looked at me then, not with panic, not with concern, with warning. She turned back to the board. I stared at her across the gold and glass and understood something ugly. She had seen my name. She knew I needed her. She had decided the people in front of her mattered more. Mrs. Vale doesn't look well. The voice came from my left.
I looked up into the painted smile of Celestine Rowe, the rival alpha who had been circling Selene's company for months under the pretense of partnership. Celestine was all velvet charm and sharpened teeth. Her family owned the city's private security contracts, half the port routes, and enough judges to make innocence expensive. Her gaze moved over me like I was an item on a list she'd been waiting to claim. "Should I call your wife?" she asked. My humiliation flared hotter than the pain. She saw. Celestine's brows lifted. "And she stayed there?" I hated the pity in her tone more than the question. Before I could answer, another wave of dizziness hit. My hand slipped on the rim of a display pedestal. A crystal vase crashed to the marble and exploded across the floor. Conversation stopped. Every head turned. The orchestra cut itself short in a whining scrape of strings. I heard my own breathing. Too fast, too weak, too loud. Selene crossed the room at last, and for one stupid second, relief burst through me so hard it hurt. Then she reached me, took my elbow in a grip that bruised, and smiled for the watching crowd. "Apologies," she said to the room, voice smooth as black ice. "My Omega has been under stress lately." A murmur rolled through the guests. I went still. Selene tightened her hold. "To prevent further incidents," she continued, "she'll be escorted home to rest." Home. Like I was a liability that needed storage. Like I hadn't just begged my mate for help in front of half the city. "Selene," I whispered. Her eyes flicked to mine. Beautiful, expressionless, untouchable. "Not now, Nera. Not now." In front of the board, the cameras, the enemies, and the women who had spent 11 months waiting to watch me crack, my own wife reduced me to an inconvenience. Security appeared within seconds. Not city security. Vale private security. Women in dark suits with earpieces and blank faces. I tried to pull back. Selene leaned closer, lips barely moving. "Don't make this worse." Worse for whom? For me? For her? For the share price? For the headlines? I didn't know anymore. What I did know was that everyone was watching as one guard took my clutch, another took my shawl, and a third guided me toward the exit, as if I were too fragile or too unstable to walk alone. I saw the board members pretending not to stare. I saw Celestine watching us with quiet interest. I saw Selene step back into their circle before I had even reached the doors. Something inside me ripped clean down the middle. That was the public humiliation. The moment the city learned exactly what I was in Selene Vale's world. not a wife, not a partner, an asset she could remove from the room when convenient. The next morning, every gossip column ran some version of the same line. Vale Omega suffers stress episode at gala. The cruelty wasn't in the words. It was in how carefully they were chosen. Nothing technically false, nothing legally actionable, just enough to make me look unstable and Selene look composed. She didn't come home that night. She didn't call until noon the next day. "I've arranged somewhere quieter for you," she said. Not hello. Not are you all right. Not I'm sorry. Somewhere quieter turned out to be the Ashbourne House estate, a Vale property 2 hours outside the city, with iron gates, forest on all sides, and signal blockers hidden behind antique walls. When I refused to go, Selene arrived at the penthouse herself. She did not shout. Selene never shouted. She simply stood in the entryway, in a charcoal coat, with snow melting in her hair, and said, "Pack a bag, Nera. I'm not your detainee." "No," she said. "You're my wife." It would have sounded better if the 3 guards behind her hadn't proved otherwise. "I'm not going." "You are." "Because it's safer?" Her jaw ticked once. "Yes." "From what?" She looked at me for 3 long seconds. "From things you don't understand." I laughed then, a cracked, ugly sound that made even me flinch. "You humiliated me in front of the city." I contained a situation. "I called you." "I know." The pain of those 2 words nearly dropped me. "You knew." I had to stay with the board. While I was collapsing. While the merger was being negotiated. There it was. The truth in clean corporate language. Her board, her merger, her image. Everything before me. "You chose them." Selene's face hardened. "I chose what keeps you alive." I stared at her. She stared back. Neither of us moved. Then she stepped closer and lowered her voice the way she always did when she wanted obedience to feel intimate. "Pack the bag, Nera." I should have screamed, thrown something, called the police. But the police answered to family names like hers, and my body was still weak from whatever had happened at the gala. So I packed one bag with shaking hands, while my wife stood in the bedroom doorway and watched. That drive to Ashbourne House was the quietest funeral I'd ever attended. Selene worked from the back seat, laptop open, phone vibrating every few minutes. I sat by the window and counted the times she looked at me. Twice. Once when I stopped answering questions from the driver. Once when a cramp twisted through my side so sharply I sucked in breath. Each time, concern flashed and vanished so fast, I almost thought I imagined it. When we arrived, snow covered the hedges in clean white rows. The manor looked too beautiful to be honest. Dark stone, tall windows, no neighboring houses, no witnesses. My new room overlooked the frozen gardens. There was a fire already lit, fresh clothes in the wardrobe, a stack of Omega health supplements on the side table. It would have been luxurious if the windows had opened and the door lock had not clicked from the outside that first night. I stood very still after I heard it. Then I crossed the room, tried the handle, and felt the final shape of my life under Selene's love. Locked. I pounded once, hard. The sound cracked through the hallway. Footsteps approached. Not hers. The head housekeeper. "Mrs. Vale asked that you rest." "I asked to leave." "I'm sorry, ma'am." "Open the door." Silence. Then retreating footsteps. That was the beginning. 3 days passed before I found out my phone had been replaced with one that could call only 5 numbers. Selene, the estate physician, the head housekeeper, security, emergency services routed through Vale Central. No friends, no lawyer, no outside line. I held the device so tightly my nails cut my palm. When Selene finally came up from the city on the 4th night, I was waiting by the hearth with the dead phone on my lap. She entered, took one look at my face, and stopped. Snow clung to the shoulders of her coat. Her scent hit the room a second later. Cold cedar, steel, the dark heat of female alpha command. My body still recognized her before my pride could stop it. I hated that. You modified my phone. Yes. You locked my door. Yes. You posted guards outside the South Terrace. Yes. Each answer came without apology, like she was confirming weather. I stood. So say it clearly. Her gaze sharpened. Say what this is. Selene closed the door behind her with one quiet click. A security measure. No. I walked toward her. No more polished words. I stopped so close her scent burned the back of my throat. What am I to you right now? Her eyes dropped to my mate mark and back up again. Mine. The answer should have melted me once. Instead, it sliced. I'm not something you keep in a vault. You are if someone is trying to take you. The room went silent. I blinked. Take me? Selene said nothing. For a second, the composure cracked. There. Gone. Who? Still silence. I laughed again, soft and ruined. Of course. She reached for me then. I stepped back. The hurt that flashed across her face was so swift, I might have missed it if I weren't starving for proof that she felt anything at all. Don't touch me unless you're finally ready to tell me the truth. Selene lowered her hand. There are threats. From whom? Business rivals. Names. Not yet. I stared at her until my eyes burned. Then I picked up the glass vase from the mantel and hurled it at the stone hearth beside her head. It shattered in a burst of white roses and water. Selene did not flinch, but the guards outside burst in. She raised one hand and they froze. Leave. They obeyed instantly. Shards glittered around her shoes. My chest heaved. I hate you. She looked at me through the ruin I'd made. No, Omega. Her voice dropped into that devastating softness she used only in private. You hate what I'm doing. I wanted to strike her for how sure she sounded. Instead, I whispered the worst thing I knew. I hate that you made me love a cage. For the first time, Selene looked wounded. Not angry. Wounded. It should have satisfied me. It didn't, because she still didn't unlock the door. On the 6th night, I heard voices below the West Hall and realised the servants changed shifts at 1 in the morning. On the 7th, I learned the library windows weren't alarmed because the storm sensor on the north wall had failed in autumn. On the 8th, I stole a brass letter opener from the writing desk and hid it in the hem of my robe. By the 9th, I had a plan. It came to me in pieces. A silver tray, a fever act, a sympathetic maid named Elia, whose younger sister had once been an Omega intern with me at the South Docks legal clinic. I didn't tell Elia everything. I told her enough. I need a city courier, I whispered,
while she changed the tea service. Her hands shook. Mrs. Vale checks all outgoing parcels. Then don't call it a parcel. I slid my wedding ring off and set it in her palm. It felt obscene, like removing bone. Sell this if you need to. She stared at the ring. That's worth more than my whole family home. Then save your family home too. Her lips parted. Mrs.
Vale will know. Then make sure she knows after I'm gone. Elia swallowed, then closed her fingers over the ring. That night, I wrote exactly 3 names on the back of a sheet of estate stationery. Talia Voss, my oldest friend from university, and now one of the few investigative journalists too stubborn to be purchased. Mara Quill, a pack rights attorney who had once told me no contract in this city was stronger than proof. And Celestine Rowe. I hesitated over that third name for a long time. Then I wrote it anyway. If Celine's enemy wanted me, then perhaps her enemy also knew why. If I was already being hunted, I would rather choose the direction I ran. The storm arrived on the 10th night. Snow first, then sleet, then black rain slashing sideways across the manor windows. At 1:12 in the morning, I poured the untouched sleeping tincture Selene insisted I take into the potted fern by the fireplace. At 1:20, I wrapped a towel around the brass tea kettle and smashed the infirmary thermometer beneath my own palm for blood. At 1:24, Elia screamed down the corridor that I had collapsed and was burning up. The estate physician came running. So did security. So did Selene, because for all her distance, she had driven from the city through freezing rain the instant the estate called. I knew because I heard her boots before I saw her. She entered my room with rain on her collar and terror in her eyes. Real terror. Nera. That one word nearly broke my resolve. She crossed to the bed. I rolled weakly toward her, let blood show on my hand, let my breathing stutter just enough. Hurts, I whispered. Her composure shattered at once. She took my face between her hands. What happened? The physician started speaking about omega instability, stress response, temperature spike. Selene cut her off. Fix it. I need the West Medical Cabinet opened, the physician said. It's faster than the main infirmary route. Selene nodded to security. Doors opened. Staff scattered. The room became movement, noise, distraction. Exactly what I needed. When Selene bent over me again, I pressed my forehead to her throat and inhaled the scent I had spent 10 nights missing and resenting. For one dangerous second, I wanted to confess everything. Instead, I slid the West Corridor keycard from inside her coat pocket. My hands were still good enough for theft. She kissed my hair. I nearly collapsed for real. I'm here, she murmured. Stay with me. At 1:33, while the physician prepared medication and Selene argued on the phone with someone she called chairwoman, I slipped into the servants' passage behind the linen cupboard. At 1:41, I crossed the West Hall in bare feet with a stolen coat over my nightdress and the brass letter opener strapped to my wrist. At 1:47, I crawled through the unalarmed library window into black rain and cut my palm on frozen stone. At 1:52, I ran into the forest with the taste of blood and betrayal in my mouth. I did not look back. If I had, I would have seen the second-floor lights erupt one by one. I would have heard Selene shout my name for the first time in our marriage. I learned about that part later. In the moment, there was only mud, rain, and the animal terror of an omega beyond pack walls, with no escort sent beside her. Branches clawed my face. My lungs burned. The world smelled like wet bark and panic. Headlights found me just before the road. A black car cut through the storm and stopped hard enough to spray gravel. The rear door opened. Celestine Rowe stepped out under an umbrella, as if the night belonged to her. For one raw second, I thought I had made the worst mistake of my life. Then she looked past me toward the dark forest and said, "Get in if you want to stay out of Celine's reach for the next hour." "I don't trust you." No one with a working mind should. Rain streamed down my hair into my eyes. "What do you want?" Celestine's smile faded. "The same thing you do." "What is that?" "The truth she's been burying." I should have run. I should have called Talia or Mara first. But Selene's cars would be on the roads within minutes, and my body was shaking too badly to survive another mile in that storm. So I climbed into the enemy's car. Celestine handed me a blanket and did not touch me. That alone felt like strategy. We drove to a private townhouse near the old harbor where no Vale staff could legally enter without a warrant. I called Talia first, then Mara. Both arrived before dawn. When Talia saw the bruises on my wrist from the gala security grip, she swore so viciously, Celestine actually laughed. Mara did not laugh. She photographed everything. My cut palm, the dead phone logs, the keycard I had stolen, the medication packets from the estate that Elia had slipped into my coat pocket before I fled. At 6 a.m, Talia opened her laptop and found my face on every city feed. Missing Omega wife of Vale heir, believed unstable and disoriented. My stomach turned over. Selene had moved fast. Too fast. "She's using the unstable angle again," Talia said. "Deliberate," Mara murmured. "If she establishes diminished reliability, she can discredit your testimony before it surfaces." Celestine leaned against the window with a cup of black coffee, untouched in her hand. "She's not only discrediting Nera." We all looked at her. Celestine's expression was unreadable. "She's shielding a deadline." "What deadline?" Celestine held my gaze for a beat too long. "Tomorrow morning, the Vale Board votes on emergency succession restructuring." My pulse thudded once. Selene had mentioned a merger, a board crisis, a chairwoman. I thought it was greed. I thought she was prioritizing business. I had not considered inheritance war. Mara sat forward. "What does that have to do with Nera?" "Everything," Celestine said. 3 months before my wedding, Chairman Vale had suffered a stroke. Not public, not on record. Only the inner board knew. The old Alpha had remained technically alive, technically in control, while Selene managed most operations behind the scenes. But the Vale Charter had a succession clause from the era when Pack dynasties cared more about bloodline stability than modern governance. If the acting heir entered a contested bond, took an Omega outside approved family registers, or was declared vulnerable to coercive scent leverage, the board could suspend her voting power and transfer interim control to the nearest approved blood relative. Selene's nearest approved blood relative was her cousin, Isolde Vale. I knew the name. Everyone did. Socialite, philanthropist, predator in cream-colored suits, and, more importantly, bonded in secret financial alliance with the Rowe Consortium until 6 weeks ago. I looked sharply at Celestine. She gave one cool shrug. Families a lie, then they betray. Why would Selene hide any of this from me? Because, Mara said quietly, already seeing the shape of it. If the board could argue you created instability in the succession chain, they could separate you by legal order. Talia's fingers paused above the keyboard. Or worse. I stared at the table between us. The room seemed to tilt. So all of this was about the board? No, Celestine said. Her voice lost some of its polish. This part was. She walked to the sideboard, opened a folder, and placed a photograph in front of me. A surveillance still. Time-stamped 2 weeks before the gala. I was leaving the downtown library. Behind me, slightly out of frame, stood a woman I recognized with a chill. Dr. Vera Holt, the Vale medical director. The same woman who had changed my suppressants. In the photo, she was passing an envelope to another woman. Isolde Vale. My throat closed. Celestine laid down a second photograph. A parking structure. Night. Isolde again, this time with a masked security operative wearing Row tactical insignia. I told you, Celestine said. No one here is innocent. Why are you showing me this? Her gaze sharpened. Because, until the gala, I thought Selene's lockdown obsession was a power play. A bitter laugh escaped me. So did I. Celestine ignored it. Then I learned someone inside the Vale circle had commissioned an extraction team. My fingers went numb. Extraction? To seize you during a scheduled low-suppressant window, force evidence of Omega instability or infidelity, and present it to the board before the succession vote. The room went dead still. Talia was the first to speak. Infidelity? Celestine nodded once. With me. I looked at her. She looked back. Cold, direct. No performance. She was going to frame me with you. Yes. The answer came not from Celestine but from Mara, who had already started connecting dates on legal documents across her tablet screen. The gala, public distress, changed medication, Celestine appearing beside you at exactly the right moment. If there had been a photograph, scent contact, or a private transport record, they could claim the bond was compromised. The blood drained from my face. Selene had seen the trap. She had ignored my calls to preserve the board vote. She had publicly distanced me to reduce scandal. Then she had hidden me in a locked estate. I should have felt relief. Instead, rage burst hotter than before, because none of it changed the worst part. She had decided all of that for me. She had let me believe I was unloved rather than trust me with the truth. She still caged me, I said. Mara's eyes softened, but only slightly. Yes. Talia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She may have been protecting you from wolves, Nera, but that doesn't make the cage love. I nodded once. Then I looked at Celestine. You said until the gala. She held my gaze. I withdrew from the plan when I learned Isolde intended to disappear you after the frame. My laugh was pure disbelief. You want a medal? No, her expression didn't change. I want Isolde ruined. I want the Vale board exposed. And I want Selene alive. That last part landed strangely. You don't hate her? Celestine was silent for a long time. Then she said, I hate how much she's willing to bleed for what she loves. I filed that away for later. At 8:20, Selene found me. Not physically, digitally. Every screen in the townhouse flickered, and the emergency broadcast channel cut in. No city seal, no government tone. Just Selene, standing in what looked like her private office, coat gone, tie loosened, eyes hollow. She had never looked less like a Vale heir, and more like a woman who had not slept. This message is for Nera Vale. Talia muttered something about illegal systems override. No one moved.
Selene looked directly into the camera, not at the city, at me. If you can see this, you are out of immediate estate range. Her voice was steady, but only just. I know you think I betrayed you. I let out a breath like a knife. You think? I cannot say everything on an unsecured channel. Of course, still controlling, still choosing the terms. But hear this clearly. Her jaw tightened. You were never in danger from me. The room stayed silent. Selene swallowed once, a tiny movement, devastating because I knew how close to loss she had to be for it to show. The people around me are compromised. The board vote was moved forward. The medical staff assigned to you were not all mine. Not all mine. The possessive phrasing almost made me break something. I should have told you more. Yes. I should have trusted you. Yes. I was wrong. That hit harder than any denial could have. Selene Vale did not say wrong, not in public, not in private, maybe not even in prayer. And yet there she was, eyes red-rimmed, saying it to a city-wide shadow broadcast like a confession dragged from bone. Then her expression changed, hardening, tracking something beyond the camera.
If Isolde reaches you first, do not go to the East Pier. Celestine swore under her breath. Damn it. Selene kept going. If Dr. Holt offers treatment, refuse. Mara was already typing, pulling injunction drafts together at brutal speed. And if you still believe nothing else I have ever said... She stopped. For one heartbeat, the heiress vanished and my wife stood in her place. I am sorry for the lock. Not for locking me away. For the lock. A woman like Selene could only apologize in the shape of the weapon. Then the broadcast cut to static. Celestine was already grabbing her coat. She's flushing Isolde. No, Mara said. She's forcing them to move before the vote. Talia snapped her laptop shut. Then we beat all of them to the board. The next 4 hours became a war. Mara filed emergency motions with PAC Civil Court. Talia contacted every ethics reporter, opposition shareholder, and 2 disgraced ex-Vale directors who had been waiting years to hurt the family. Celestine opened channels I suspect were not strictly legal. And me. I did the thing Selene should have trusted me to do from the beginning. I became dangerous. I wrote a statement. Not the kind polished by publicists, not the kind softened for sympathy. I wrote the truth. I wrote about the changed medication, the ignored calls, the public humiliation, the estate lock, the replaced phone, the stolen key card, the hidden succession clause, the extraction plan. Then I signed it with my full name, Nera Vale. Not because I belonged to Selene, because I intended to use her empire's own name to crack it open. By noon, the city had gone rabid. Half the networks called me a manipulated Omega, the other half called me a whistleblower. PAC rights organizations swarmed the courthouse steps. The board postponed its vote for exactly 40 minutes before legal pressure forced an emergency hearing open to media observation. That was where the real confrontation happened. The Vale headquarters boardroom occupied the top floor of the tower where I had once lived, as if height could protect us from consequence. Floor-to-ceiling glass, dark wood, a table long enough to make intimacy impossible. When I entered with Mara and Talia beside me, cameras flashed hard enough to leave after images. Board members turned. Lawyers shifted. PAC elders whispered. And at the far end of the room, Selene stood alone. She wore white this time. Not innocence. War. The color made the dark crescents under her eyes more obvious. She looked at me once, full and unguarded, and in that glance I saw everything she had not been brave enough to say. Fear, relief, love, regret so thick it seemed to bruise the air. Then her face closed, and the hearing began. Isolde Vale arrived 7 minutes late and smiling. Cream suit, pearl earrings, poison under powder. Dr. Holt sat 2 seats behind her with legal counsel. Celestine came in through the side access, not sitting with either camp, expression cool enough to start frost. The chairwoman called for order. Mara did not wait for ceremony. She submitted the medication reports first, then the restricted phone records, then the succession clause sealed under historic board archive. Gasps moved like ripples around the room. Isolde remained composed until Talia's team projected the surveillance photographs across the rear screen. That was the first crack. Dr. Holt went pale. The second crack came when Celestine stood and publicly testified that her own family security wing had been solicited by Isolde's proxy for an Omega extraction tied to succession leverage. The boardroom exploded. Lawyers talking over one another, investors shouting, pack elders demanding censure, cameras devouring every second. Through all of it, I looked only at Selene. She did not interrupt. She did not rescue her reputation. She let the evidence burn. Because there was one truth still missing. Mine. When the chairwoman finally asked if I wished to speak, the room went so quiet, I could hear the heat system. I stood. My knees shook once, then steadied. I was told I was being protected, I said. My voice sounded stranger on microphones. Stronger, too. I was told nothing that mattered. Not about the clause, not about the extraction plan, not about my own medication. I looked directly at the board. You do not get to turn Omega bodies into leverage and call it governance. No one moved. I turned then, not to Isolde, not to the cameras, to Selene. 100 people watched us and ceased to matter. My wife says she locked me away to keep me safe. Selene's throat moved. She's right about one thing. There was danger. I held her gaze. But she was wrong about the lock. Pain flashed across her face. Good. Let her feel all of it. You humiliated me before the city. You ignored me when I called for you. You put guards on my body before you put truth in my hands. Selene stood perfectly still. I wondered if anyone else could see how tightly she had curled her fingers against the table edge. You protected me from your enemies, I said. Then made me survive you, too. The silence after that line felt like a blade. I let it stay. Then I turned to Isolde. And you. Her smile had finally vanished. You used my body and my bond as a route to power. You changed my medication and planned to frame me. My voice sharpened. So hear me clearly. I will bury you. For the first time, Isolde looked rattled. Good. The hearing might have ended there in legal chaos if Isolde hadn't made one fatal mistake. She laughed. Softly. Disbelievingly. Then she said, You're still just an Omega. The room recoiled. Not because elites didn't think it, because she had said it on record. Mara smiled like a blade leaving its sheath. Celestine, unexpectedly, smiled too. And Selene moved. Not fast, not wild. That would have been easier to dismiss. She simply stepped forward with all the terrible precision of a female alpha who had spent her life turning force into control. Withdraw that statement, she said. Isolde lifted her chin. Or what? Selene's eyes went cold enough to kill. Or I stop protecting this family from what I know. The chairwoman blanched. Isolde understood before anyone else did. There are no records. Selene's smile was the most frightening thing I had ever seen. I made the records. And then she dropped them. A private archive, offshore transfers, medical tampering authorizations, board bribery trails, succession manipulation memos signed with coded approval chains tracing back not only to Isolde and Dr. Holt, but to 3 sitting directors and the chairwoman herself. For months, maybe years, Selene had been collecting evidence against her own blood. Not out of morality, out of contingency, because she had always planned 3 wars ahead. A storm passed through the boardroom without weather. Resignations began before the legal officers finished reading the first file. Dr. Holt tried to leave. Security stopped her. This time not Vale security, court officers. Isolde said something vicious I didn't catch because Selene's gaze found mine again. No triumph, no relief, only exhaustion. The hearing adjourned under emergency seizure order. The tower became a nest kicked open. Reporters flooded the plaza below. Share prices crashed. Messages exploded across every public network in the city. By sunset, Isolde Vale was under formal investigation. Dr. Holt lost her medical license. The chairwoman voluntarily stepped aside. And Selene Vale, who could have spun the narrative to save herself, stood before the press and did the one thing I had never seen her do under lights. She told the truth. Badly. I failed my wife. The reporters pounced. Selene did not dodge. I believed secrecy was protection. Flash. I believed distance was safer than trust. Flash. I was wrong. Flash. Did you imprison your Omega, Ms. Vale? A lesser alpha would have denied it. Selene closed her eyes once briefly, then opened them. Yes. The plaza erupted. Every screen in the city carried it live. Yes. No publicist-approved sentence, no strategic ambiguity, just a blade of truth laid down in front of millions. I watched from Mara's office above the courthouse, with Talia on one side and Celestine on the other. No one spoke until the conference ended. Then Talia exhaled. Well, Mara closed her folder. She just detonated her own defense. Celestine watched the darkened screen a second longer than necessary. She chose Nera over the company. I laughed without humor. She should have done that at the gala. No one argued. The next 3 days were a blur of depositions, legal protections, and interviews I gave only when Mara could sit close enough to kick me if I overexposed something sensitive. The city devoured the scandal. The public loved the image of a ruthless alpha heir brought low by her own monstrous tenderness. They loved me more. The locked Omega who had escaped the estate and cracked the dynasty open. They called me brave. I felt mostly tired. Selene sent flowers once. I returned them unopened. She sent a written statement through Mara. I refused it unread. She did not try the penthouse. She did not try the townhouse. She did not try to force anything again. That, more than any apology, told me she had finally understood where the line was. A week later, I visited Ashbourne House one last time. Not to reconcile, to reclaim. Mara insisted on court escort. Talia insisted on photographing every room.
I insisted on opening my own door. The lock had been removed by order. The mark remained in the wood where I had once pounded to be let out. I touched it lightly. Then I stripped the room of everything I had left behind. Books, scarves, a half-finished sketch from the desk drawer I had never known Selene kept. That stopped me. It was charcoal on cream paper.
Me asleep by the library window in the penthouse, months before the gala. One hand tucked under my cheek, sunlight across my legs. At the bottom, in Selene's tight, precise script, she had written only one sentence. I do not know how to love gently yet. My throat closed. I folded the sketch anyway and put it in my bag. Not forgiveness. Evidence. Of love. Of damage. Of both. When I turned to leave, I found Selene standing in the doorway. No guards, no entourage, no black coat of power. Just Selene in a dark sweater with shadows under her eyes, and a woman's fear plain on her face. Mara took one step forward. I lifted a hand. It's fine. It wasn't, but I needed this to be mine. Mara and Talia retreated down the hall. Selene stayed where she was, as if approaching without permission would break something irreparable. Maybe it would. I asked them not to tell you I was here, I said. They didn't. Her voice was rougher than I remembered. I guessed. Of course she had. She looked around the room once, took in the packed bag, the empty shelves, the removed lock. Her gaze returned to me. I deserve this. That was new. Dangerous, too, because remorse looked good on her. I crossed my arms to keep from reaching for old habits. What do you want, Selene? She inhaled slowly. To apologize where there are no cameras. Silence pressed between us. You can. She nodded once, but when she opened her mouth, nothing came out. For the first time since I had known her, Selene Vale looked uncertain. Then she laughed softly at herself. I had speeches prepared for the board, for regulators, for shareholders. Her eyes lifted to mine. I can't seem to manage one sentence with you. That sounds like a you problem. A tiny flinch, deserved. Yes. She took one careful step into the room. I loved you like a threat assessment. The honesty hit me harder than poetry would have. I mapped exits. I controlled access. I counted risks instead of asking what fear was doing to you. Another step. Still not close enough to touch. I thought if I could survive the danger for you, it would count as devotion. Her voice broke on the last word. It did something vicious to my chest. It counted as arrogance. Selene swallowed. I knew the board would use you. I knew Isolde would come through medicine, through optics, through your Omega status if she could. Her gaze did not leave mine. I saw the trap. And I still let you think I had chosen the board over you, because I believed terror was acceptable if it kept you breathing. I waited. She kept going. I was wrong at the gala. Yes. I was wrong at the estate. Yes. I was wrong every time I took your choice and called it love. The room felt suddenly too small. My eyes burned. I hated it. I hated that she could still reach me like this after everything. Selene's voice dropped. There is no defense. No. There is only this. She sank to her knees on the floorboards. Not dramatic, not for effect, not because anyone was there to witness it. A female alpha of her rank, her pride, her name. Kneeling. My breath caught. She looked up at me the way she had never allowed herself to before. Without power, without control. Just Mead. I am sorry, Nera. Every nerve in my body lit up. She was so beautiful like that, it made me furious. I know sorry doesn't unlock the door retroactively. Her mouth twisted, bitter at herself. I know it doesn't erase the look on your face at the gala. I know it doesn't give you back the nights you spent afraid of me. A beat. A wound. But if there is anything left I can do that is not possession, and not strategy, and not violence wearing expensive clothes. Her voice shook. I will do it. I stared down at the woman who had once felt bigger than the city, and saw the exact size of her sorrow. For a terrible second, I wanted to forgive her. That was how old love worked. It crawled from the ashes the moment it smelled regret. But I had learned something in the forest. Love was not enough if it came without freedom. So I said the hardest mercy I had. You can let me go. Selene went very still. Not surprised. She had known. But hearing it still landed like a blade. If that's what you want, she whispered. It is. She closed her eyes once. When she opened them, they were wet, not falling tears. Selene was too disciplined for that. Just bright with the effort of keeping them inside. Then I'll sign. A clean break, not a stall, not a manipulative pause, not one more cage disguised as patience. I won't contest property, bond dissolution, or public statement terms, she said. Everything from the penthouse is yours if you want it, nothing if you don't. Her voice grew quieter. I have already transferred the South Docks Legal Clinic endowment into your name. I blinked. What? I should have done it before. I stared. That clinic had served low-income Omegas navigating contracts, custody, housing, and suppression abuse. I had volunteered there before marriage swallowed my time. You can't buy absolution. No. Her answer came instantly. I know. Then why? Because it mattered to you before I made your life revolve around mine. That hurt worse than any defense could have, because she finally understood the scale of what she had taken. The room stayed silent for a long time. Wind pressed against the manor windows. Somewhere down the hall, Talia pretended not to listen very loudly. I looked at Selene, at the woman kneeling where she had once stood holding keys. And I made the choice she should have trusted me to make from the beginning. I believe you loved me, I said. Her face changed. Hope and grief at war. I do not believe you knew how to stop controlling what you loved. The hope dimmed. Accurate. And I won't live under that again. Selene lowered her head once. A bow. Acceptance. Then she rose, with the stiff care of someone standing up inside a wound. She did not come close. She did not ask for a final touch. For that alone, I nearly broke. There will be papers by tomorrow, she said. I'll sign first. I nodded. She moved to the doorway, paused. Her back stayed to me. I never ignored your gala calls because I didn't care. I closed my eyes. Of course, this would be the knife she left with. I know. You didn't know. Her voice roughened. I thought, if I walked to you then, Isolde would see panic and know exactly where to press harder. I gripped the bag strap until my fingers hurt. I know that now. A silence. Then, softly, the line that nearly ended me. I still should have come. When she left, she closed the door gently. No lock, just a click. For the first time in months, I heard one and did not tense. The bond dissolution became the city's favorite scandal for another week. The legal separation was brutal on paper and strangely quiet in practice. Selene signed every document within an hour of receipt. No delays, no pressure, no hidden clauses. The board attempted to salvage the family by offering her uncontested emergency chair control if she retracted certain statements and framed the estate confinement as medical necessity. She resigned instead. That made bigger headlines than the scandal itself. The heiress walking away from the throne, the woman they called born for power, choosing disgrace over a polished lie. I refused 3 exclusive interview offers and took the clinic keys instead. The South Docks Legal Center occupied an old brick building by the fish market with cracked stairs and windows that rattled in bad weather. It was perfect. It was mine. For the first time in 2 years, I arranged my own desk, picked my own tea, opened my own door. I hired Elia as operations manager after ensuring her family could relocate safely. I hired 2 Omega advocates, 1 beta accountant who feared no billionaire, and Talia, as an unpaid menace who kept showing up anyway with pastries and rumors. Mara handled our charter filings and pretended not to be proud. We renamed the center Open Door. Not subtle, exactly right. The city understood the message. So did Selene. I know because on the first day the new brass plaque went up, a donation arrived from an anonymous trust for emergency Omega housing, trauma counseling, and legal defense. No sender, no note. But the amount was so meticulously structured to avoid tax spectacle and public credit that I recognized her hand in it at once. I accepted the money, not the woman. Some endings are not softened by gratitude. 3 months later, winter loosened. The city thawed into slush and pale sunlight. I had a routine again. Clinic at 8, court support cases on Tuesdays, contract workshops on Thursdays, community dinners every second Friday where omegas, betas, and even a few nervous young alphas came to learn how not to turn love into ownership. Sometimes I still woke at night, reaching for a body that was no longer there. Sometimes I still saw the gala in my dreams. Sometimes I missed her so hard it felt like a second skeleton under my skin. But missing was not the same as returning. That was another thing I had learned. On the first truly warm afternoon of spring, Celestine visited the clinic. She arrived alone, carrying a white orchid and the expression of a woman who hated being sentimental. "I'm here to make a donation and confirm you still despise me." I took the orchid. Moderately. She smiled. Progress. We had become something odd after the war. Not friends, not enemies. Co-conspirators linked by the same catastrophe. She had testified against her former allies, burned several profitable bridges, and somehow emerged wealthier anyway. I didn't ask how. She did not ask whether I still loved Selene. She was too intelligent for questions with visible answers. Before she left, she paused by the reception desk. "She's leaving the city." I went still. My expression must have changed because Celestine added, almost gently, "Not to pressure you. You deserve to know." "When?" "Tonight." I looked down at the orchid in my hands. "Where?" "North Coast Restructuring Project. Small pack territories. Disaster infrastructure." I laughed once. She's taking ruined things and trying to build them better. Celestine's mouth curved. "Yes." A pause. "She asked me not to tell you." Of course she had. "Why are you telling me?" Celestine adjusted her gloves. "Because unlike Selene, I have learned information should belong to the person it can hurt." Then she left. I worked until dusk with my mind nowhere near the clinic. At 7, I closed the office early. At 7:20, I found myself in front of the river terminal where private northbound ferries departed. I had not meant to come. That was the lie I told myself. The truth was uglier and simpler. Some endings need witnesses. The terminal was nearly empty. Wind lifted the loose strands of my hair. Ships groaned against their ropes. And there, at the far end of the pier beneath a single lamp, stood Selene. No entourage, no cameras, no empire. Just a dark coat, one travel case, and the posture of a woman holding herself together through discipline alone. She turned before I spoke. Of course she sensed me. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she gave the smallest nod. I walked closer until there were only 3 feet between us, and old ghosts on both sides. "You're leaving?" "Yes." Without telling me. A humorless breath escaped her. "I'm trying to learn the difference between informing and imposing." That was almost funny. Almost. We stood in the wind and let the river say the things we couldn't yet. Finally, Selene reached into her coat and held out an envelope. "I won't touch you," she said quietly. "I know." I took it. Inside was the final notarized dissolution order. Signed, filed, complete. No legal threads, no hidden anchors, total freedom. Tucked behind it was one more sheet. Transfer confirmation for the Open Door Endowment's permanent trust. Irrevocable. I looked up. Selene watched my face like she always had. Only now there was distance where control used to be. "This is goodbye," I said. "Yes." The word hurt us both. I could hear it. Selene looked past me once toward the lights of the city, then back. "I used to think keeping you close was the same as keeping you safe." Her voice stayed even. "It took losing you to understand. Safety without choice is just a prettier name for fear." I folded the papers carefully. The wind snapped at the edges. "You changed." "No," she said after a beat. "I broke. Then I changed." Fair. Painfully fair. The ferry horn sounded in the dark. Boarding soon. Last chance for dramatic reversals. Last chance for begged forgiveness and impossible reunions. But my life was no longer a cage with better lighting, and Selene, to her credit, no longer tried to make it one. "I did love you," I said. Her eyes closed briefly. Not in denial, in relief that at least one true thing remained true. "I know. I might always love some version of you." The lamp above us hummed. Selene's throat worked. "That version didn't deserve you." "No." I stepped back once, a final line. "But this version might deserve peace." For the first time that night, something like warmth touched her face. Not joy. She had forfeited easy joy with me. But something gentler. Something earned. "Thank you, Nera." I nodded. Then, because endings should be clean, and because she had finally given me the dignity of choice, I gave her one thing freely. Not a kiss, not a promise, not hope. A blessing. Go build something that doesn't need a lock. Selene inhaled sharply. The ferry crew called final boarding. She lifted her case. Stopped. "Open door suits you." A real smile tugged at my mouth before I could stop it. "Good." She looked at me one last time. Not possessive, not hungry. Just seeing. Then she turned and walked toward the ferry. She did not look back. This time, she knew better. I stood on the pier until the boat became a row of lights on black water. Only then did I leave. The city no longer felt like her territory when I crossed back through it. It felt like mine. A week later, Open Door held its first public legal education night for bonded partners. The room overflowed. Omegas with bruised paperwork, alphas with guilty eyes, betas with notebooks, young women who had never before heard anyone say love could be real and still become controlling if no one named the line. I stood at the front beneath the new brass plaque and told them what I wished someone had told me before I ever mistook devotion for ownership. Protection without consent is control. Pens moved, eyes lifted, silence deepened. And love without trust becomes surveillance. More pens, a few tears. One young Omega in the second row sat straighter, as if the sentence had unlocked a window inside her chest. Good. After the seminar, I stayed late stacking chairs. The building smelled like tea and paper and the cheap lemon polish Elia insisted on using. I turned off the final light in the main room and saw the city reflected faintly in the glass. Not a prison tower, not a gala hall, not a locked estate in winter. Just streets, just people, just a future with doors I could open myself. My phone buzzed once as I was locking up. Unknown number. For a moment, old instinct tightened my spine. Then I opened it. A message. No manipulation, no request, no pressure. Just one line. The North Coast shelter passed inspection today. I hope your doors stayed open. No name attached. No need. I looked at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back the only answer that belonged to this version of us. They did. I slipped the phone into my coat and stepped into the night. The wind was cool, the street was bright, my pulse was steady. No guards followed, no lock waited. No one owned the shape of my next decision. I walked home alone and did not feel lonely. That was the revenge in the end. Not destroying Selene, not making the city kneel, not winning the scandal. Freedom. The kind she could not control, the board could not contract, and fear could not rename. She had once locked me away for safety. Now I carried my own keys. And that was the last chapter. No open door left for darkness. No unfinished vow. No part 2 hidden in the shadows. Just me, alive, unowned, and finally seen by myself first.